Good morning, everybody. This is a beautiful day on this Saturday morning. Thank you so much for actually joining me on A Different Perspective. I am so excited that you guys are here this morning. And actually just want to let you guys know, this morning I'm actually recording it because currently at 8 o'clock in the morning, I will be down with Dr. Dale Brown from an office down in the Nashville area. And so I'm probably even watching myself right now on this show. So just to let you guys know, I'm here in studio obviously right now, and I'm going to cover an amazing topic that I want to talk about that I believe that there's so much confusion today, and that's menopause. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to sit back and we're going to give you a different perspective on an issue that I believe that there's so much confusion on. Because if we look at menopause, I want you to think about this. If you are, let's say, in your 40s right now, and I look at you and say, over the next roughly 10 years, you're going to enter menopause. Now, let me ask you a question. How much excitement do you have to go through that transition? Well, if you ask most women today, and they've done surveys on this, women are actually devastated knowing that they're going to go into menopause because of what everybody seems to go through with it. Because once again, it's there's not much excitement. There's not much with people going through the devastating physical things they go through and emotional things. People are sometimes deathly afraid of it. I'm hoping to put that to rest today because there's so much misinformation about menopause. I'm going to show you how I came up with my perspective on it. And that's why I believe that it's different. And that's why today our different perspective is on menopause. So let me start with a story that started to change my thinking when it came to menopause. Now, let me give you a little backstory on this. Do you understand that most of the things that I learned no different than every other doctor, every other chiropractor, every other naturopath, every other nutritionist, every other practitioner. I learned from the same people that everybody else did. But some things never set right with me. There's some things that I always questioned that people are told as normal. And this is the perfect topic to discuss this. And what started my process to think different about this actually wasn't my wife. I started to take care of female hormone problems because of my wife, but obviously she was in her 20s, she wasn't menopausal. So I'm going to go through a story that was a woman who was 72 years old. She had come into me because she was referred by her daughter, because her daughter actually had some hormonal issues in her cyclic realm. She was actually in her 30s. And she said, listen, my mom is going through some horrible hormonal issues. And I'm like, okay, have her come on in. So she entered the office, and I went through, and she went through some of the most standard things that women suffer from with menopause. She actually had, once again, she had hot flashes. She had vaginal dryness. She actually started to gain some weight. She started to be irritable. She wasn't sleeping as good. She'd wake up from being too warm. She'd be too cold sometimes. She felt like an oven sometimes and felt like a freezer at other times. And so as she came in, I went through some testing. And once again, I'm just going to generalize because I want to get the concept of the story. And it was interesting because over the course of roughly 8 months, the conditions that she came with all those that I just described, they started to resolve. And it was interesting because she said to me, she goes, I'm so happy my menopausal symptoms went away. And it struck me right there. And it started to get me to think differently. And I looked at her and I said, Jean, you are still in menopause because menopause is a stage of life. It's not a condition. And she looked at me, she goes, you're right. And I was going, oh my goodness, that was a transition for me to think differently. Because she was 73 years old. I think she turned 74 during the time me taking care of her. And I'm like going, listen, I didn't get rid of your menopause. You're still in menopause. It's a transition of life. So then why is it then that so many women are so fearful of it? Why is it that you hear the most devastating from physical to mental stories that when women go from a transition from a cyclic woman to menopause? Because I believe it's not well understood. Now, why not? let me show you some of the things that are perpetuated out there that can be extremely misleading if you are menopausal. Now, one thing I want to say is, so Doc, but wait, I'm 20 years old. I have Dr. Jen sitting here. She's 25 years old, or 26, and she don't care about menopause. To her, 25 years roughly, because the average age is roughly around 51, 25 years to her is double her life. She's not even thinking about that. But as Dr. Jen, being a practitioner, understands, menopause is very important for her to understand right now because of the transition. So here we go. So I want you to show why women are so confused about what's going on out there, because just look at the daily things that are put out there on all the basic medical stuff. And let's start out with WebMD. From the Menopause Health Center. So actually, if you type in menopause and WebMD pops up, this is the first thing that comes up there. Now let's watch the language that gets women to start to be confused about menopause. Here we go. Menopausal symptoms include irregular periods, hot flashes, night sweats, sleep difficulties, and irritability. Menopausal treatments may include hormone therapy or herbal. All right? So I want you to think about this. They actually, look at the words, menopause symptoms. Well, let's go back to Jean, 73, 74 years old. And she actually experienced some of those things, but they are gone now. And they stayed away. Yet she was still in menopause. So see how they're confusing? They almost directly tell women that this is acceptable in life. So let's go on a little farther. Let's take a look at the National Institute of Health of Aging. Okay, so NIH, and let's go NI of Aging. What is menopause? So let's look at the whole description. And they give a story. Now, once again, this is right on their website. So you can, once again, everything they show you, you can go follow along yourself just by actually jumping on Google and type in menopause. So once again, they talk about Larissa's story and how she has hot flashes and trouble sleeping and lack of sleep. She is ready to talk to her doctor about finding some relief. Once again, hormonal therapy is once again the most common thing that they do with women. And as you saw, they actually threw some herbals in there also. So see, they're trying to set women up to go, this is your future. That's why menopause, for example, is looked at like a devastating disease. But to continue what it says down a little further as you read what it is, Larissa is experiencing the menopausal transition, a normal part of aging. It is not a disease or disorder. And that was a big part that I realized 20 some years ago. That when Jean came in, that menopause is not a disease. It's something that should not be feared. But then how can there be menopausal symptoms? Well, let's keep going. After the menopausal transition, many women feel relieved that they no longer have to worry about painful periods, cramps, or getting pregnant. All right? Now it goes through some other things about what goes on. For others, the menopausal transition can bring hot flashes, trouble sleeping, moodiness. No, you don't get away with that. You don't get to go away with that. That say some women are going to go through these symptoms and some women are not. And then you have women, I've literally heard this. Well, my grandma had tough menopause, and my mom did, so now I expect to, and I am. It's just, it's my genes, it's my factors. But my friend, she had none. She was so lucky. That's not true. Okay, that's not true at all. Because here's what happens. Let's take Jean, for example, that was going through at 73 years old, menopausal symptoms. When I looked at her and said, listen, I got rid of your menopause, she kind of giggled because she knew that was not true. I looked at her and said, I changed your gene pool. She laughed at me and I laughed at myself because we know that's not true. See, so that's where I was sitting there going, but I do agree when they talk about this is a normal part of the aging process. But these things are not. Hot flashes, sleeping, moodiness, painful sex, depression, that is not a normal transition. If you look at the transition, let's take this. I have some daughters that are non-cyclic and I have some daughters that are cyclic. They made a transition from being non-cyclic to cyclic. They're going to make a transition from cyclic to menopausal. Okay? That's normal aging. That's going to happen. Every one of you women that, for example, reach a certain age, if you live long enough, you're going to hit menopause. It's as predictable as the sun coming up. So it's not saying that we know exactly what age you're going to transition. The average age range is around 51 years old in the United States. In other countries, believe it or not, it can range up to 55 based on the health of the woman. Okay, now, so let's keep going on. So let's pull up what Mayo Clinic says. I've used this because they've said the same thing for a long period of time. So let's look at how it's even confusing within a very short time of just listening how they define it. So what is menopause? Menopause is that time that marks the end of your menstrual cycle. Yes, it ends menstruation, and therefore what happens, you don't have a cycle anymore. It's diagnosed roughly over 12 months, not having a period, roughly happens in the 40s, 50s, average 51. Menopause is a natural biological process. I like that. I like that a lot. You're right. Now watch how they give the most beautiful description of it being a natural biological process, and then let's go right to this. But the physical symptoms such as hot flashes, emotional symptoms of menopause may disrupt your sleep, lower your energy, and affect emotional health. That, and within one sentence, they destroy their credibility of what they talk about. Because you cannot have a normal biological process and then all these symptoms of what goes on. That is not normal. See, so they're confusing women. Okay, so what you see now is all these transitions of what they're talking about. Now it continues to go on. Well, then guess what? All the symptoms of menopause: irregular periods, vaginal dryness, hot flashes, chills, night sweats, sleep problems, poop, movement, weight gain, thinning of hair, loss of breast fullness. So then these things are accepted as normal. These things are accepted as genetic. These are accepted as bad luck because my friend didn't get them, but I did. Because when I went through the transition from cyclic to menopausal, I went through all these things. And so did my mother, and so did my grandmother, and these are why I had them. I have heard that thousands and thousands of times. Now, what are some of the causes as they list here, okay? When you look at some of the causes, menopause can result from natural decline of reproductive hormones. So they're saying those things can actually be introduced into your body and present if there's a natural reduction of hormones. That's not really true. Okay, but let's go on. Hysterectomy. I agree with that. I absolutely agree with that 100%. Because if you remove a full hysterectomy, and we're going to talk about that, of the uterus and ovaries, you'll become completely hormone deficient. Yes, chemotherapy and radiation. Yes, that's going to destroy your hormones. There is no doubt. Primary ovarian insufficiency. Okay, your ovaries get fatigued and can't keep up. Now, if you look, complications. What happens when you go through menopause? They talk about heart problems, osteoporosis, urinary incontinence, sexual dysfunction, weight gain. Now, think about it. So they talk about this natural biological process. They talk about some of the causal factors. They actually said, here is your future. And I see why women are so devastated with this. But I'm here to tell you that the perspective that they have is actually causing a major stress to women, but also an acceptance that if women go through that, this is okay. And I'm here to tell you that's not. And that's why women are this. Are you as confused as I am? If all I did was read what they put out there, I would be devastatingly confused. Because you go from it's a natural biological process to all these things coming up with it that way. I mean, that would make me depressed if I was a woman. Knowing that my future is to do, just because I'm making a transition from a cyclic woman, to where I'm supposed to have a baby, to that my future is going to be all these things. And we accept that as normal. But we accept that as normal because the people who have led us through the transition of a cycle to menopause have a very little understanding of what it was. Why? Because that's when I actually had my light bulb moment. Okay? And it started with one woman in menopause. And now we have dealt with hundreds of thousands of women in menopause with all of our clinics. So when you think about this, my light bulb moment was realizing, number one, menopause is as normal and natural as any transition of life. Then what happens, the people, why they're going through all these devastating symptoms, there has to be a reason. I believe that, once again, that we are approaching menopause in the wrong way. And that's why I start to actually go, hey, listen, well, when you look at the approach, when the current approach is our medical approach. And that's why if you look, when I first started practice, it was almost ridiculously, you could predict what they were going to do when a woman hit menopause. They're putting them on some hormone therapy. But now they're even scared to put them on a hormone therapy because why? Because it actually was inducing so much cancer. So what's all these things going on? See, that's why when you look at what's going on there currently, it's very confusing. So let's talk about some of the things that we can look at that made that transition from, once again, from cyclic woman to menopause woman, and why could all those devastating symptoms and conditions happen in one woman, but not another. And see, they talk so much about a transition from cyclic to perimenopause to what? To menopause. I'm here to tell you that anybody that says that even perimenopause is actually a thing is wrong. It's a made up thing. You're either cyclic or menopausal or non-cyclic. There is no perimenopause. Perimenopause is actually a mentally defining thing to actually soothe women from not worrying that they're going through so many devastating things. It's made up. Perimenopause is made up, okay? Because if you look at it this way, it's just that you're going through the symptoms and they're going through earlier, and you might hit 42 and might go through the transition from cyclic to menopause over the couple of years, and so we're going to call it perimenopause during your suffering. And like, oh, this is perimenopause. It's not menopause yet, but it's perimenopause. There is no such thing. I'm here to tell you there is no such thing as perimenopause, regardless if your current doctors tell you there is or not. All right? Because once again, that doesn't make any biological sense. You're either cyclic or you're not. Your ovaries don't go, yeah, I'm going to transition into this perimenopause thing. No, you're either going to produce cyclic hormones or you are not. So the transition is not, once again, that you're looking to go from cyclic to perimenopause. Here's the big thing. Estrogens are not the problem. See, because, doc, the reason why they stopped giving so much hormone therapy is because they were giving a synthetic form of estradiol, and it was actually causing women to actually end up with breast cancer and other cancers, so they stopped it, all right? Now, if you look, for example, estrogen is a term. That's why you always see me say estrogens, because there's a significant amount of estrogens. But the one thing that I want to show you is this. Estrogen is the key transition component that is so key to know if a woman goes through menopause and from cyclic to menopause at a basis that will determine if they have any symptoms. Let me say again. Your transition is not understanding cyclic to menopausal. Your transition to actually know what menopause is going to be like is estrogens are not the problem. The transition of estrogens to one form or another is the problem. And why? Because when we are, for example, when women actually hit their cycle, there's a hormone called estradiol. Actually, in medical terms, they call it E2. There's actually multiple estrogens, and they call them E1, E2, E3. You go to most medical schools, the most chiropractic schools, all the other things. Women are very well known, and they understand those, okay? They talk about those. I even ask women, say, do you understand there's E4? Do you understand that there's over 10 estrogens? And most women are just kind of blown away going, I never knew that. So if you are cyclic right now, the one thing I want to tell you, if you want to have a great experience transitioning from cyclic to menopause, guess what happens? You have to understand your transition, not of your age, not at a stage of life. You have to understand the transition of your estrogens. And when you do, and they can transition properly, you will not have the major menopausal symptoms that medicine defines that women go through today. Because when I had Jean when she was 73, I'll show you some of the things that happened with her hormones that allowed her to not only have great symptoms, but also end up with bone problems and everything like that, because her estrogens were not transitioning properly, and she was high in some and extremely low in others. Now, what I mean by transition, it's quite simple, okay? Let's talk in general and give you a little estrogen, rundown this way. When a young lady gets her cycle, E2, estradiol, okay, if you look it up, it's spelled E-S-T-A-D-I-O-L, okay? It's the most focused on hormone because it actually helps women develop their sex characteristics, helps develop their body, helps maintain it. And that's one of the major estrogens that actually, go through and change your uterus, change your breast tissue, change your hips, change your fat tissue, change your muscle tissue. It also helps heart growth. That's why when women go through menopause, that they say, standard woman, when they go through menopause, they have more chance for heart disease. Well, estrogen by nature, estradiol, is actually an antioxidant. It's very cardioprotective for women. It's one of the reasons why women actually suffer a little bit less than heart disease than men because estrogen itself is cardioprotective. So therefore, if estrogen levels drop too significantly and get too low, their rate of heart disease goes up dramatically. That's why when they found out, even if they give a woman synthetic estrogen, their chance of heart disease does decrease. Now, obviously, I'm not a fan of that because the estrogen affects more than your heart, and that's why women that have breast cancer and other cancers. So here's what happens. But when a woman actually transitions from cyclic to menopausal, the estradiol, for example, becomes less produced, and it's taken over by a dominant hormone, estrogen. It's called E1. How you spell that is E-S-T-R-O-N-E. All right? So, and those hormones can transition back and forth. Let me explain. You have to understand that hormones transition. So a transition from a cyclic woman to a menopausal woman, yes, there is an overall global reduction in the amount of hormone that a woman has. But what determines a woman going through symptoms, I'm not going to say menopausal symptoms. Please, if you talk to a Wellness Way doctor, they will never say menopausal symptoms. They may say you're experiencing symptoms during the time of menopausal, but there's also women that have symptoms during cyclic. That's why we can't confuse, once again, that menopause is automatically connected to these symptoms. No. They're connected to those symptoms if the hormones cannot transition. And another way of saying transition is convert from one form to another. And the one thing that I found out with Gene and basically every woman on the planet is nobody was testing the conversions, the transitions from one form to another. And I started doing that at 20 some years ago. And the next thing I know, I'm going, all right, well, when you are cyclic, they transition a little differently than when you're in menopause. And so therefore, that's why when a woman transitions from cyclic to menopause, you have to make sure certain organ systems are doing really well. Otherwise, the conversion, the transition will not happen properly. And then you're going to end up with vaginal dryness, osteoporosis, heart problems, and everything like that. I hope you follow me on that because that's a big thing. The transition, so I want to go back here. Go back here. Estrogens are not the problem because what they'll tell women, you have an estrogen problem, so we need to give you estrogen. Well, here's what happens. Do you understand this? Do you understand that if you are deficient or you're in excess in anything, your body knows it. It's trying to do everything it can to be normal, okay? That's why, once again, if you even get a synthetic hormone, it tries to take it and do its function. That's why women feel better when they do it. But it also can force some things, and guess what happens? There ends up more problems with that. But here's the big thing. The transition of estrogens from one form to another is the biggest problem. So that's why when we do these things and look at these conversions, it's so key to everything. Now, let's look at this. So I'm going to make a little bit simpler chart for you to do it. And the reason why I pulled up this chart also, do you understand? Do me a favor. Once again, as I do, I always pull references out for you so you can follow along, but you can do your own research. Remember, I want you to stop listening to people and start learning, and then that allows you to think differently. So if you just go into Google search and type in, steroid hormone pathway, all this is a basic hormone conversion chart, all right? So therefore, once again, you can follow along and see, wow, hormones convert. They convert from one form to another, and here's the enzymes and the things that they need and where they do it. Do you know what's really funny? I still remember, which I was never taught in school, in all the education, in 8 years of education I had post high school, I can honestly tell you, 90% of the stuff that I teach you guys about, I never heard one professor ever tell me. Not once. What it came down to was I was presented with a problem that nobody had an answer to, and I had to think differently. And so I came from a different perspective. So I talked about Gene, talking about my wife, talking about all the stories I've always shared with you. So now, when you look at a pathway like this, it's quite neat because, once again, it's a conversion chart, all right? Now, let's set the basis right here. If you look at all steroid hormones, so every estrogen, all the estrogen that women have, estrogens, for example, aren't just E1, E2, and E3. There's also E4. There's also a bunch of metabolites. And what I found out was each one of those metabolites, each one of those hormones, they will convert in different organs. Now, if you look, let's start here. In general, if you look at any steroid hormone, including estrogen, every steroid hormone comes from cholesterol. So that's why when Dr. Greg, and why I had him do cholesterol last week for a different perspective, is because it's no different than the week before when I said, listen, when a person says cholesterol is bad for you, a doctor, or they want to put you on a cholesterol medication, once again, it's like, let's talk about 8-track tapes or cassette tapes or VHS. I mean, we are still having a conversation about cholesterol, that it has any contribution to heart disease whatsoever. We know that's a big fallacy. Yet it's so perpetuated. Remember, you guys know I repeat things a lot, and I'm going to repeat this. Who said this? If it's said loud enough and long enough, people will believe it, and they'll take it to their grave. Hitler. And they've been saying cholesterol's bad, cholesterol's bad, cholesterol's bad, cholesterol's bad, cholesterol's bad. My doctor said cholesterol's bad. Remember, if you say it long enough and loud enough, people will believe it. That was Hitler's quote. Cholesterol is essential for life. So if a doctor even talks to you about lowering your cholesterol, that's like, why don't you ask them about 8-track tapes also for your car? For these young docs and staff, like 8-track tapes, you don't even remember what that is. Okay, they have no idea what it is. Well, you guys weren't even alive when there were cassette tapes, okay? I still remember when I was in college, I used to listen to everything on a cassette tape that way and rewind it and wore it out. It's kind of funny. Because like I said, there's a basic understanding of biology, the basic understanding, they are the precursor. But cholesterol has to transition. Cholesterol has to convert into its hormone, steroid hormone. And it does. It converts into pregnenolone and converts down their estrogens. And this happens with certain enzymes and certain activities in certain organs. Well, here's what happens. A lot of this production and transition when you are cyclic happens within the ovary. It also happens in a smaller fraction within the adrenals. It also happens within a smaller fraction in the fat tissue. So think about this, ladies. When you're cyclic, to have a good cycle, you must transition, you must convert hormones in the ovary, the adrenals, and your fat tissue. Yes, I said it. Ladies, think about this. You will never look like a guy, and if you do, you're sick. Let me explain. I don't care how good looking your man is, he's always not going to have as nice skin as you if you're healthy. Do you know why? Because you have a nice little extra layer of adipose tissue, aka fat tissue, that makes you guys silky smooth. You do. You guys, that's why you guys have smoother bodies than guys. You're supposed to. That's why when I see these women working out and having 6-packs, I can almost predict what their hormones are going to be like, because women are not supposed to have 6-packs. And every woman sitting in the studio right now just yelled amen. Because we have this culture and this fallacy that if we put and jump on Instagram and throw a picture of them in their shorty shorts and their halter top, I they call halter tops, girls, what are they called? You know what I'm saying? And it's like, and then show their 6-pack, that they're more of a woman. And I'm going to tell you right now, no, they're a very sick woman. Because women are supposed to have that natural layer of adipose tissue that helps them produce hormones. That's why I kind of giggle. I recently reached out to a very good doc who's a very good chiropractor, but his practice is mainly based on adjusting. And his wife, actually, they're posting every day, and she goes to the gym 6 days a week. And she's very petite and, and doesn't have much fat tissue. And I'm like, I even said the message to him, say, hey, I'd love to test your wife's hormones because, going to the gym every day like that, she is going to have dramatically low hormones. I can honestly tell you right now, I've yet to meet a woman that works out, that is very skinny that way, actually has normal hormones. It's virtually impossible. You're taking one of the major transition materials away for hormones to convert. Okay? It's why, now ladies, let's think about this though. Let's think about this. We talk about the transition and the conversion happening within the ovaries, the adrenals, and the fat tissue. So now, think about this transition, ladies. When you transition from cyclic to menopause, your ovaries do not have to mature and develop those eggs. So the majority of your hormones are based on your adrenals and your fat tissue. Well, I got a question for you, ladies. What if your adrenals are fatigued out? Your body says, oh my goodness, I only have one other thing that can help me convert and transition, and that's fat tissue. And your body will say, I need to survive. I'm smart. I'm going to do what I can. And it starts to produce more fat tissue, even though you've changed nothing. You still eat the same. You still exercise the same. You still have the same stress levels. And I've had thousands upon thousands of women come to me and go, Doc, oh my goodness, I've done nothing, but guess what? I'm gaining weight. It's menopause. No, your body's trying to survive the transition, the conversion, because a lot of women don't realize that when they come from cyclic to menopausal, if their adrenals are very fatigued, they're going to gain weight and have to do nothing. So all of you cyclic women out there, like I said, you don't have to be menopausal to understand this. But if Dr. Jen, who starts her own practice here in a couple of months, if all she does is stress out for the next 25 years and goes through that transition and doesn't keep her adrenals good, even though she knows how to do that clinically, she's going to transition from cyclic to menopausal, and she's going to call me up one day and go, Doc, I'm gaining weight and I'm doing everything right. No, you're not doing everything right. All right? And everybody in the studio is kind of laughing that way. I kind of like it, having more people in the studio, and there's the transition tape time. So, and I know that makes a lot of sense. That was a light bulb moment for me. I was like, hold the phone. This is awesome. It was like, boom. I'm like going, so the transition, for example, is a conversion from one form to another. Okay? And if we don't work on those transitions, what happens is those estrogen levels are going to get thrown off, and then you're going to end up with all these great symptoms. Now, that there is one problem with that, is if you had a hysterectomy. Because I know, once again, this is going to come up a lot. When you have a hysterectomy, you leave your body in a very deficient state. Now, you say, why, Doc? The ovaries, as you said, once again, do not produce anything post-menopausal. Well, think about this. If you've gotten your body to such a sick state that you need a hysterectomy, I can almost guarantee you that your adrenals and your adipose tissue are not at the state that they need to be, that you are going to run significantly deficient. It's why a lot of times women, once again, cannot control their weight, is because, once again, they're not converting and they're not metabolizing. Metabolism, by definition, is a conversion process of a fat-soluble thing to a water-soluble thing. And that's why they can't control their weight, they can't maintain it, they can't do certain things. And so when you actually take out the ovaries, there's such a loss of any hormone, and you end extremely deficient, so you don't even have anything to convert. And that's why you'll end up with symptoms of osteoporosis, osteopenia. Guess what? Urinary incontinence, vaginal dryness, hormones going up and down. And I'm going to say this, and nobody has ever told you this, and I want to be the first one to tell you this. People come to me and say, Doc, what about bioidenticals? Well, it's very simple. If you do this, if you've had a full hysterectomy, if you have removed your ovaries, you will need to be on some bioidentical probably the rest of your life, especially during your cyclic years. And I have met women that have ovarian cancer, uterine cancer, and I'll tell you right now, I had no problem with them having a hysterectomy. I did not. They were done having children, no problem with it, okay? Because I wouldn't want that cancer to spread to different areas. So if you had a hysterectomy, I totally get it. I totally understand. You could have, or maybe it wasn't even cancer. Maybe there was so much cysteine and bad things in there, you just had to have them removed because of the massive pain. Totally get it. But the bad part is because doctors now have caused so much cancer through the 2000s and later that most doctors are extremely hesitant about giving you giving you hormone therapy because of the cancer risks. Now on the flip side, once again, Nicole just recently did a video about this. On the flip side, you will need a bioidentical, but you got to be very careful about bioidenticals because just because you give a bioidentical, if you don't get the proper conversion, you can end up even with cancer on a bioidentical. I actually had a doctor here in our local hospitals, because here's what happens. Medicine will always try to steal what works. Because why? Because the demand. So get this. So our local medical groups here, what happens is they, go to school for their stuff, and then they actually see what works that way. And then I'm trying to be nice and not use their name, but their initials are Prevea. And so I actually had doctors at Prevea, which I have a good friend who's a medical doctor there and everything like that. And they actually put women on bioidenticals, and then all of a sudden, guess what happens? They're getting hair on their chin, and their sex drive is nuts. And the doctor says, well, at least you're not deficient, and bioidenticals can't cause cancer. What fantasy world are you living in telling a person like that? And here's what their explanation was. Bioidenticals are plant-based. They're very natural. Well, let me see a question for you ladies out there. The majority of women out there do not get cancer from bioidenticals or hormone therapy. They get cancer from their own hormones being abnormal. And what's more natural than their own hormones? And a woman looked at me when I said that to her one time because her testosterone levels were psychotically high. Her estradiol levels were psychotically high. She felt a ton better. Her husband was happy because her testosterone levels were going crazy, but she had hair on her chin, and she found herself being more aggressive. Well, guess what? She was like, oh my goodness. She went back to the doctor, and guess what happened? She said, I can't be on these things because they're going to cause me massive problems. And the doctor looked at her and said, well, what do you expect me to do? Well, it was interesting. That right there, her heart just dropped into her stomach because she's like, I have to do something different. Now that woman is here doing wonderful. Now, don't get me wrong. She needs to be on a bioidentical the rest of her life. Do you know why? Because they did a hysterectomy. Okay? Now, don't get me wrong. We got her in a great state. We found out what wasn't converting properly. We started to create those transitions, those conversion, and she's maintaining a great level at a much less dose. So yes, ladies, I do understand hysterectomies. I get it. I wish doctors would tell you before they did it that you're going to have to take something the rest of your life, and then you're going to have to be monitored more often than a woman that's not on a bioidentical. See, that's the part that I wish they'd tell you. It's like this. If you've had your gallbladder removed, you need to take some bile salts the rest of your life every time before you eat. What? Yes. No one's ever told you that. I wish they'd tell you that before they tell you, you can live well without your gallbladder. That is a lie. That's a complete lie. You cannot live well without your gallbladder. You can survive without your gallbladder, but you will actually have some major problems. Now, if you've had it removed, don't freak out. Just find a good wellness way doctor and they will show you how to do it. Okay? Just like this. If you had your hysterectomy, don't freak out. Find a good doc that actually knows what they're doing so you don't have all these problems, because menopause is not an illness. If you are over 55 years old, you're probably in menopause. It's as God-given as the sun coming up tomorrow and the moon coming later. That's just what happens. It's a good thing. But if it's not done right, if the transitions are not done right, if the conversions are not done right, it's hell on earth. And that's why menopause is feared so much today. So let me show you a menopausal woman here. Why did this woman end up with cancer? Why did she end up with cancer? Because when they measured her estrone, her E1, it was normal. It was normal. And they said it can't be hormonal cancer because her E1 was normal. Well, ladies, there's always a balance to hormones. Estrogen by nature is a very growth hormone. Progesterone keeps under control. So her progesterone was actually low, both in urine and in blood. I'm only showing you the urine so we can talk about the conversions and transitions. Now people say, Doc, what's more important when it comes to menopause? Actually, I would say get your blood done first, but you need both tests. But I like to see estrone and estradiol in the blood because there's some other markers I can get like pregnenolone and DHEA, which are better taken in the blood. There's also great forms to see in the urine. I just like to see both. It's why people say, Doc, how'd you get so well known for hormones? Well, I said, you need 2 tests to actually have a complete picture. I know that's simple, guys, but I came out as a 24-year-old kid with an idea saying, how can we assess a 73-year-old menopausal woman if we don't have a picture of everything? How can I assess a woman that said that you can't have babies if you don't assess all the hormones? But that's what happened. Recently, our office that I'm going to tomorrow, a medical doctor just sent a woman to our office in Nashville to get her hormones tested so they're done right. See, an exciting thing. I've been criticized by practitioners all over the world. And trust me, I will tell you this. I've shared my personal life with you guys. My wife will share you stories with you. There's some times when I was in my early 20s, when I was Jen's age, 26, a couple years in practice and criticism was coming. Man, I'll tell you, message Christy and she will tell you, there was times I felt like giving up. There was times I felt like, do I really want to keep sharing the information that I'm sharing? Because it came with huge, huge, huge criticism. It came with huge amount of disappointment. There's not anybody out there that actually wants anybody to say anything bad about them. But imagine you know you're doing things right and you're trying to do good for people, and people are hugely critical. Talk about emotional. So it's kind of cool. Now, once again, you say, Doc, well, that's years later now that you see this. Yes. And so if you're doing things right, regardless of the criticism you get, keep moving forward. Because once again, you may be ridiculed now, but guess what happens? They may listen later. So as that happened, I said, listen, look at this woman. Estradiol was normal, progesterone was starting to get low, but look at this. Her 4-hydroxyestrone, which is a big contributor to breast cancer, was quite elevated. And she wasn't converting her hormones. She wasn't transitioning. So in menopause, even though her hormones have dropped extremely low, even though the doctors actually said, nope, your estrogen, which is the dominant hormone during menopause, she said it's not hormonal. So they didn't know what to do. So what happens this, they end up coming here, I got this test, and guess what? She went back to her oncologist and said, we need to put you on aromatase inhibitor, and we need to put you on estrogen blockers. Now, think about that. Now, it was interesting because before everything was normal because they had an incomplete view of her hormones. And they saw an estrogen that can contribute massively to breast cancer being elevated. And now they freaked out because now I said, there it is. And I looked at the woman and said, listen, you can listen to them, you can do what you want, but I will tell you this though. Once again, they didn't even understand the hormones itself to even look at what the causal factors could be. Why don't we actually help this convert? Why don't we help it transition to its normal form so you don't have to worry about it in the first place? And we did. And she is still alive, doing extremely well today. Okay? Think about that. So if you're a cyclic young lady right now and you're watching this, your menopause, when you hit that at that age, the key is not, once again, just getting older and actually doing things right. The key is actually having the transition of your hormones from one form to another to convert them properly. So when you transition from an organ system not producing as much, that all those forms can convert one to another so that your body can still do what it needs to do to maintain these sex characteristics you have so you don't end up with vaginal dryness. So you don't end up with sleep problems that way. This woman, for example, they couldn't understand, once again, why she ended up with cancer and menopause because they had an incomplete view. So if you're 40 years old right now and you have not had your full hormones tested, you have no idea what menopause is going to be for you. And for the few women right now that actually go through menopause and don't have that big a problem, you're going to find out that is a rarity, not the norm. The reason why menopause is so feared today is because women have no idea where their complete view of their hormones is and what's going on. And it's really funny. Do you know where this woman had a problem? Do you know where this woman had a problem? In her liver. In her liver. Because the majority of our hormones, once again, will convert in our liver. That's where the mass majority of you want those hormones converting. You say, Doc, but wait, some of our hormones can convert in adipose tissue from androstenedione and all this into estrogens and things like that. Yes, it can. It's why, once again, this is one thing that is in the cyclic realm is very frustrating for women. There'll be women that actually carry excessive weight and have no problem getting pregnant. And then very skinny women sometimes have a very hard time getting pregnant because their liver function is not good and they don't have a fat tissue to convert, so they end up hormone deficient. And then sad part is, then they'll end up with other conversions that actually cause them to even have estrogen dominant problems. See, that's why a woman can be very skinny and have cysts. You say, well, it's more apt for a woman that has a little bit of weight her to have cysts. Yes, but it's not the standard. See, so when you look at this, this is the whole key thing about transitioning. Transitioning, aka conversion, is actually not an age issue. It's a liver, it's an adrenal, it's an ovary, it's a fat tissue. It's all those gears working together. It's why I've always said, we have to stop looking at the body like one gear. That's why if you go back to my video talking about Swiss watch, that's one of the biggest clinical things that made me figure things out was the fact that, once again, that the body acts like a Swiss watch and all these gears have to coincide together, because even if one gear is affected, it affects the whole system. Yet we have specialists for the ovaries. We have specialists for the liver. We have specialists for the heart. We have specialists for the foot. We have specialists for the spine. And they so focus on that one gear, they can't understand this whole process. So when your OB says estrogen is normal, well, they know very little to nothing about the liver. They know very little to nothing about these hormones. So for that medical doctor that referred to our Wellness Way in Nashville, God bless you. Because to me, that doctor, for example, cares deeply about that woman's hormones. And once again said, listen, I want you to get the best care and the best assessment of it. The one thing I will tell you right now, I'm very proud of this. I'm very proud of all the Wellness Way doctors across the country because they are assessing women and men from that hormonal standpoint or that Swiss watch standpoint better than anybody in the world. And I'm proud of that. I'm extremely proud of that because we are giving a look at hormonal things different than anybody. And it's exciting. It's very exciting because we get to actually have women experience the transition from from cycle to menopause, and not go through the devastation. We have women that come in at 60, 70, 80, 90 years old telling us they're going through all these devastating things, and guess what? Get to see them understand those things start to go away. And guess what? We didn't get rid of their menopause because they're still in it. Because it's as God-given as the sun coming up. Okay? Now, once again, I want to show that pathway a little closer. As you can see, once again, should be in this purple line way up here. Normal, deficient. See, so think about this. This woman has normal hormones of some estrogens, has some low and some high. Think about this woman's life. That's like trying to bake a cake with a messed up recipe. It's not going to taste good. This woman inside is low hormones, high, and normal. But her doctor, because he didn't understand, told her that I don't know why you got breast cancer during your menopausal state because your estrone and even your estradiol was actually low. It doesn't make any sense. They clinically couldn't perceive what was happening there. Man, this is the exciting stuff. This is why I love this. It's why that when I can get a picture of what a woman's body is doing at a certain time in their life. And here's one thing that I say, Doc, well, I'm in my menopausal state. How often should I get my hormones tested? Guys, listen, hormones should be tested at least once a year. Now, if you're suffering, let's say, now Christy's I do a little more often. Why? Not because there's anything wrong with her. I like to do a little bit more often because of her history. Okay? I want to make sure that she never has a chance of going back to that process. So I always make sure, now her lifestyle, that doesn't contribute to it anymore. But the idea is I want to make sure that things are actually converting really well so her uterus doesn't ever get extremely thick again like that. Okay? So what can we do right now? What can we do? What can we do during this menopausal state or even a cyclic state? It's kind of, to me, I know it sounds funny. It doesn't matter if you're 7 years old. It doesn't matter if you're 30 years old. It doesn't matter if you're 73 years old. You need a complete view of what everything is going on. Okay? So if we look, what can we start to do to start to actually have more of a normal menopausal state? Number one, get tested. I am thoroughly blown away that, once again, that most people have never been tested properly. I can honestly tell you, I'm actually kind of saddened every day that when a woman comes in and says, Doc, I've had hormones tested, and I look and they're so dramatically incomplete, it breaks my heart. Because it's hard to actually assess a woman properly, or a man, but we're talking about menopause, talking a lot about women today, about the state of their body if you don't get a big picture of it. Number two, liver health. It's key. Ladies, it's very important for those conversions that transition for liver health. Now, I did something today that I very rarely do, But I know, for example, that women need some help ASAP. And the greatest thing that you can do for your liver is add Sisandra. Sisandra is the greatest herb on the planet for women, bar none. My wife and daughters will take it every day till I die. It is the greatest herb for women there is out there today. And they say, look, Doc, he said, Doc, it's known as the anti-aging longevity herb for women. Yes, it is. You know why? It actually helps. It's the only herb out there that has such an effect on the liver that affects all the pathways. That's why I'm obsessed with it. I'm obsessed with it. I'm thoroughly obsessed with it that way. It's one of the things that when I was actually figuring out the liver and all the pathways, I'm like, see, they use drugs to manipulate it. I'm trying to actually find how to restore those pathways. See, what made the Wellness Way doctors such clinical experts is understanding all the conversions. As you guys see, we have trainings with our doctors on a weekly basis to understand all those pathways and everything. Because why? Because you will understand those, you can almost know how the body's going to react. We were doing a question and answer this week, and all of a sudden a woman gave me some things go on, and I had Nancy and Brandon ask around and said, does she have, sensitivity to light? And they're like, and she answered yes. How did I know that? Because if you're going to convert from A to B, B to C, C to D, and something happens at B, C and D, there's things that go on. It's basic biochemistry and physiological reactions that way. That's the coolest part about understanding all this, okay? Now, second of all, adrenal health, extremely important. Now, one of my most favorite things for the adrenals, ashwagandha. Ashwagandha, by far, okay? Because what it does, it actually does a great job of giving the adrenals an ability to adapt. It's one of the greatest adaptogens for the adrenals. Now, I will tell you this, you say, Doc, but as you can tell right here, you talk about reduced mental stress in number 8. Yes, stressors affect the adrenals. I have talked at length at this. Ladies, you need to watch your stress. If there's one thing that I will preach every day, I'm leaving today to go speak in Nashville. I'm going to speak at 2 different places. And one of my biggest messages I'm trying to get across to both men and women is ladies have to reduce their mental stress. If it does not, it will destroy their hormones. It'll destroy it. And I will show you practical ways to reduce it. I'll show you practical ways to understand this. I'll show you practical ways that if men and women don't understand this, you're going to have a sick wife. You're going to. It's virtually impossible. Okay, you cannot have high mental stress, ladies, and think that you're going to actually have good health. It's virtually impossible. Okay, I will show you all the pathways, all the biochemistry, and you say, Doc, you're always telling men to show up at your seminar. Yes, because men have to understand this. Because you know why? Because you're a big contributor to their stress. You are. So I want you to understand it. If you understand that, you treat them differently. I actually can tell you right now, I treat my wife differently because I realize that if she stresses out, it's going to affect her health. If I stress out, nothing really happens. Actually, I honestly tell you the truth, testosterone is actually increased by stress. So a guy can actually handle it. It's meant to. All right? Like I said, I've always told you guys, understand this has made me a better doctor, a better husband, a better friend, a better boss. Because when you know those things, you do things differently. That's why stop listening, start learning that gets you to think differently. Okay? Reduce sugar intake. Now why? Because once again, if you produce too much fat tissue, you'll create conversions that you don't want to. Okay? So watch your sugar intake, especially if you're a man, because that will convert your testosterone down to estrogens. It's one of the reasons why it's a big contributor to breast cancer, because you convert, aromatase is the word, that enzyme in your fat tissue converts your testosterone and things like that to estrogens, which can now lead to a bad conversion process that causes cancers. Okay? Number 3, eat cruciferous vegetables. If there's one thing, ladies, that you can eat on a regular basis that does help hormone conversion and to protect your body, it's cruciferous vegetables. Eat them on a regular basis. It's part of my household. It always will be. I will make sure that my daughters and my wife have them on a multiple weekly basis because it's one of the things that you can eat on a regular basis that will keep good conversions. Now, there's other things, but like I said, in general, these are the steps that you can take to actually, if you're cyclic or menopausal. See, to me, here's what happens. There's no difference between being cyclic and menopausal because there's a production of hormones, there's a conversion, and there's a physiological reaction. That happens from a little girl to cyclic to menopausal. There's just different levels. Do you get it, guys? The difference between a young lady, the difference between a cyclic woman, and the difference between a menopausal woman, they all have the same hormones. They're different levels. But what determines levels is the transition, is the conversions by multiple organs. And that's why when you just look at the ovaries and tell me you deal with female hormones, you don't understand what's going on, because the body's a Swiss watch. We have to stop looking at specialists and think they can actually take a whole encompassing view on hormones. It's virtually impossible. A specialist, I have defined a specialist. A specialist is a person that knows more and more about less and less. Now, you say, Doc, when is a good time to have a specialist? If you have a tumor on your ovary, I want a specialist that can remove it. I don't want a foot doctor coming in to remove your ovary. I don't want a brain surgeon to come remove your ovary. But I do want a brain surgeon to remove your tumor and be a specialist. But we're talking about normal hormones, normal things, and actually getting your life back to normal, okay? And to understand that, you have to look at the body like a Swiss watch. It's so important. So I know I repeat this consistently, but this is key. We need to stop listening and start learning. And like I said, I'm going to add to this, because then we can think differently. Man, I try to put out as much material for you so then you can, once again, start to learn something, digest what people are telling you, okay? And this happens every single week. Doc, you make things so easy to understand, but I still struggle because my doctor says this, okay? Well, have him explain what he means. So that's why I'm always going to do videos, and my videos are always going to seem controversial. They're always going to seem kind of like a little bit more aggressive, because you are being told so much stuff that's leading women, men into a bad state of health. You say, Doc, how can you say that? Statistically, we're sicker every year, guys. We're sicker every year. And if people just keep on saying stuff loud enough and long enough, people believe it. So if you go to almost every doctor on the planet that says cholesterol is bad, and you get 50 doctors from the 3 hospitals together, they'll all tell you cholesterol is bad. Do you see what I'm saying? And then doctors like us come along and say, no, you are wrong. And because they can't tear on us as far as our information, they'll ask you things like this. What's your degree? What's your background? And I'll say, listen, your background has led people to be very sick. And on that note, remember, take the information I give you, wrestle with it, digest it, study it, look at your references, go to those things, because I believe that once you do, you'll see and start to think differently, which now will lead to different actions, which will lead to better health and better understanding. So, menopause. I hope I gave you a different perspective. Just remember, the transition is not going from cyclic to actually menopausal. The transition is converting your hormones from one form to another in multiple organ systems. And for you to have a good menopausal state, for you to have a good cyclic state, you need to transition those from one point to another. My name is Dr. Patrick Flynn. Thank you so much for watching A Different Perspective on Menopause. God bless all you guys. Have a beautiful Saturday. Hey, thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss a single video or live stream. Also, share this video with a friend. Once again, thank you for watching.